Got a package full of wishes.
Oh, I've dug myself into a hole. I have 4 book reviews to do, and they've got to get done. It is 12:30 at night. I have to be at work at 12 tomorrow. I've got to get these 4 book reviews absolutely done. And it's all my fault. Let's just tell me to do better. But I think what I'm going to start with is the shortest. The one I enjoyed the least was also one that I absolutely 100% skip. Sorry. It is 12:30 in the morning, I should say. Or, yeah, in the morning. I'm so tired. But it's the one that I 100% skipped a chunk of. And I really just don't have much to say. I thought it was pretty terrible. Considering how impressed I've been with some of this romance, which we know I don't do romance. Considering how impressed I've been with some of the romance I have been reading, I thought this one felt very superficial, one-dimensional, cliched. I'm sure a lot of women are going to like this because it's more up their alley than it is mine. But when it comes to Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, it just did not ring my bell. So let's get into it so I can then get into our next one. And you know, another good thing is I finally finished with this notebook, which I absolutely loathe this notebook because of the orientation. But did I go to any better of a notebook? Absolutely not. It still is going to confuse me as to which way I should turn the page. But Part of Your World, we have 2 main characters, Alexis Montgomery and Daniel Grant. And they are polar opposites ends of the spectrum when it comes to lifestyle. She is part of this medical legacy that has founded this hospital, and for the last 150 years somebody in her family has worked at this hospital, whereas he lives in a super duper small town where he is the mayor, but it's kind of just by title only because there's nothing to do in this town. This town is so small. It's pretty hoppin' during the summer, but it is the off season, so there's nothing to do. And not only that, but he is a good 10 years younger than her, which I thought was going to play more of a part in the story than it did, but we'll get into that later. So we open up, and Alexis is on her way home from a funeral. In her efforts to avoid, I think, a raccoon, she goes off the road, and she's waiting for a tow truck. Somebody pulls up behind her and is like, the guy that you've called, it's going to take a while, mostly because he's at the bar right now, so let me help you out. And she's like, okay, sure. He pulls her out, he goes on his merry way. Then they end up at the same bar together. If you didn't know, Daniel is the guy that pulled her out. What I forgot to mention is that not only is he the mayor, but he is a carpenter, kind of by trade. But he also runs the local B&B, except it's the off season, so there is no B&B. But the B&B is held in his ancestral home. I think his great-great-grandfather had built this home. It's about the same age as the hospital that Alexis's family had founded, but he cannot afford to live there, and so he lives in the loft in the garage or something. A little bit of a spoiler here. His mother was very young when she had him. I think she was 15. His father was a tourist, so guy was never in the picture. And his mother never managed to grow up, so he ended up living with his grandparents for most of his life. For some reason, his grandfather willed this house to his mother. He hypothesizes that the intent was eventually to change the will to him when he was older, but then they died suddenly and it never happened, so now his mother owns the house. She's a ne'er-do-well. She just makes a lot of poor choices, just lives her life chasing men. A lot of what he does or what he earns from this bread and breakfast, this bed and breakfast, is to fund her lifestyle. So, yes, they are at the bar. We have a dual perspective, so we see him hanging out with his friends, and the friends are betting who can get Alexis to go home with them. He's like, time for me to go, but before he goes, he stops by and he's like, so here's the deal. Those two guys over there are trying to figure out who can get you to go home with them, and these are going to be their tactics. She looks at him and goes, well, why don't I just leave with you? They leave, and there's chemistry. He's a good-looking guy, she's a good-looking girl. It's very obvious that she's way out of his league financially, but they get along, so they end up going to his home. This is total foreshadowing where she's like, I don't do one-night stands. Well, of course they do a one-night stand. And we pick up with her sneaking out because somehow she learned his age. It's not specified how. Was it before they slept together? Was it somehow after they slept together? Whatever it was enough to drive her away. She goes home and she's freaking out. Little side note here. She was in a relationship with another, I think he's the chief of surgery, this guy named Neil. They recently had a bad breakup. I really felt like Jimenez was trying to create depth and true issues, but just couldn't quite get there. So with this, it is, on the surface, she broke up with Neil because he cheated on her. But her real reason for breaking up with him was because he was emotionally abusive, which I think is great, except we couldn't, in my opinion, we couldn't sufficiently dig into that, because I think the problem was, and I thought Daniel was more relatable, at least at first, and then he became this simpering idiot who was so emotional. I get it. We want men to show that they're emotional too, but for me, that's not particularly attractive. So I stopped relating to him when he was all about her rather than the issues he was facing. But because she is so superficial, because it's all about how hot Daniel is, how good the sex is, how hot she is, how all of her friends are like mega successful, mega beautiful. Okay, they're in crappy relationships, but like, I guess we gotta humanize them. There was, in my opinion, so little to really develop her and flesh her out, that to all of a sudden be like, oh, well, he was emotionally abusive, I couldn't quite buy it. I think we should have just stuck with the fact that he was a major jerkwad and he cheated on her. But she and Neil, even though they were never married, they're both on the deed to this house. So throughout the novel, they are going to be fighting over who gets the house. She walks in and there is her brother, and I would have liked a little bit more of him. Over the course of the novel, I did see how Jimenez brought him in, like the idea of him in, rather than having him there physically. And so on some level it did work, but I felt like he was such a catalyst. I wish he had been physically present a little bit more. It was almost like he was kind of a throwaway, like he was only there to be the catalyst. Brother, his name is Derek. He's also a doctor, and he has been in Cambodia doing some kind of goodwill work. And she goes, well, so you couldn't have come for the funeral? He's like, absolutely not. Which I thought Derek was kind of her opposite in that he had substance. Jimenez tries to give Alexis substance, but she just kept pulling us back into this place that was substance-less. But he's like, yeah, I've got something to tell you. One, I'm not moving back to the States. I'm going to stay in Cambodia. Two, before I tell you, number two, you need to sign an NDA. And she's like, are you serious? He's like, yes, you have to sign this or else I can't tell you what I'm going to tell you. She signs it, and he tells her that he has married this mega pop star. Her name is Nikki, but her stage name is Lola Simone. And I guess she's also involved in humanitarian work. She had been in Cambodia. They fell in love. They are now married. But because he is not coming back to the States, it means she cannot leave the hospital because how dare there not be a Montgomery at this hospital, but because of her breakup with Neil, she does not want to be at this hospital. Additionally, she has always been something of a disappointment to her parents, particularly her dad, because she decided to go into emergency medicine rather than surgery. And for him, that was just wasted potential. And throughout this novel, we get him degrading her and telling her how she doesn't work hard and all that stuff. And that then goes into how he was apparently abusive, and her mother in many ways just went along with it, and how he dragged her down to his level in terms of she was a strong, smart woman, but she had no voice of her own. Frankly, I had skipped the majority of that, so that's all I can give you. Now we've got the scene set up where she is facing a dilemma, and we don't really have anything from Daniel yet. But what does happen with Daniel is he gets a call from his mom, who, as I said, I mean, she's just an adult child. And every now and again, depending on her whim, depending on what man she's with, she will make unreasonable requests. This time she's calling to tell him that she's going to sell the house. And he's like, you cannot sell this house. And the house is called Grant House. She's like, well, too bad. It really doesn't matter what you want. It's my house. I'm going to do what I want. So he gets her to agree to give him 6 months to make the money to buy her out. As I've said, he is a carpenter kind of by trade, but he doesn't do a whole lot in terms of selling. And Alexis, because Alexis is so cosmopolitan, she can recognize really great quality work. She's like, why don't you do more of this? And then why don't you sell it for more? And he's like, because it's like a labor of love. I want to do this. Like, I don't want to overcharge people. Now we have this idea, and in my head, I'm just like, the end result is going to be Alexis gives the house over to Neil, and then she will give Daniel the money. Not exactly how it worked out, but in many ways we ended up there anyways. Amongst all the stuff that goes on with Alexis, we do meet her friend group. We meet Bree, who is her best friend and is also a physician at this hospital. I think Bree is great. I think if Jimenez had done to Alexis what she did with Bree, I would have liked Alexis more. I thought Bree was witty, intelligent, substantive, and Alexis was just not an airhead rich girl, but like she lacked qualities that I thought were relatable for the everyman. So we meet Bree, then we meet Gabby and Jessica. I believe Jessica is Alexis's neighbor. I can't remember how she knows Abby, but I think what they are supposed to represent is that super superficial side of Alexis that she doesn't recognize she possesses. This comes into play later. But before that, a week goes by, and Daniel's kind of going crazy about the fact that he hasn't had contact with her, that she up and left in the middle of the night. She, on the other hand, had actually taken his hoodie with her. It's such a high school thing to do. I know it's supposed to be endearing, but I felt like it was out of character for her. So here's the other thing. He kind of charmed her because one of his friends has a goat, and this goat has a kid. So he kind of charms her by talking about how he has a kid, and this kid's name is not there, Chloe. So he's charmed her with Chloe. She's met Chloe, and then she meets Hunter, an old bird dog who apparently is deaf. But okay, I am not an animal person. I'm particularly not a dog person. They're growing on me, but for the whole, I don't see the need for pets in books unless they have a purpose. So I understand that Jimenez was trying to make Hunter cute and funny and lovable, but to me, I'm like, he's a dog that doesn't listen. He jumps all over her. He creates issues. This is not endearing to me. She sleeps over his place, which in many ways feels like a hayloft. So when she's leaving, she steps in feces, animal feces of some sort. She encounters a pig. She gets muddled over her. So for some reason, I don't know if it's because she's in such a mess, but she takes his hoodie. He is in a state because he's like, I have no way to contact this amazing woman. She buckles and she calls him. They begin this very situationship kind of relationship where it's all physical, and she doesn't want him to come to her. She just wants to go to him. From the jump, he's committed to her. Like, he has no issue with the age gap. It worries him with the age gap and the financial differences that's what is going to bother her. But from the jump, he's like, I want to be with this woman. She tells him, hey, I don't have the bandwidth in my life to have anything serious. I'm going through stuff. So I like you. I enjoy having sex with you, but I don't want more than that. He's like, yeah, sure, totally, fine, whatever. The other thing that's happening is that she applies for the chief of emergency medicine, and when Neil shows up to say, I'm moving back in, he brings these cops with him. He's like, legally, I have a right to be here. I'd skipped through all of this too, but she mandates that they go to counseling, both individual counseling and couples counseling. This is the only way that she is willing to work through things with him. And this again, I thought was strange, because he's like, absolutely, I will do whatever. And I'm like, for a guy that's set up to be so terrible, he sure is willing to do things that you're not, because she never goes to counseling. She never even tries to go to counseling. This is just her way to appease the situation, because also her dad loves him. He wants them to be together. And so he's happy to see that she's trying to work things out. So we have her applying for this job. We have him living in the basement and her saying, these are my rules in order for things to move forward. And then here is where Jessica and Gabby come into play. All this other stuff happens too, but it doesn't matter. They were going to go on a girls' weekend trip. So because Daniel has got to make money to buy this house, he opens up the B&B. Frankly, I don't know why he thinks it'd be a good idea, because there's literally nothing to do. It is the off season. They don't have restaurants to eat at. So I don't know why he thinks people are going to come, or at least come back. But because he opens this B&B, whoever, Gabby, Jessica, whoever made the reservation, changed their plans without letting Alexis know. And then she realizes where they're going, and she's like, oh my gosh, I gotta let Daniel know, but he has to act like he doesn't know me. Daniel does not get the message. So they show up, and he's all cool. He's really stoked about how, I think there's 4 rooms in this house, and now 3 of them are already occupied, including the one that has the Jack and Jill bathroom. So it just makes it a little bit easier for whoever or whomever wants to rent out the 4th room. And then Alexis walks through the door, and he's like, what's going on here? She's pretending like they don't know each other. Hunter enters the picture, and he like jumps all over her, and I know the dog is supposed to be cute, but I thought he was a nuisance. Gabby and Jessica, being as superficial as they are, like, what's going on here? So Alexis and Daniel chat. He reveals why the bed and breakfast is open, and she's just like, this has got to be the best experience, so that my friends will write rave reviews and Daniel's reputation will continue to be pristine. Because when she looked up the B&B, there's nothing but 5-star reviews. Well, that happened with the dog. And then they go to breakfast, and Hunter, and this is where we determine that Hunter has to be deaf, because he will obey hand signs but then act like he can't even hear you when you're talking. And Daniel's like, oh, it must be because of when he was a bird dog and all the gunshots ruined his hearing. Hunter comes in with a dead squirrel. I guess the squirrel wasn't so dead, but this disrupts the breakfast. Things go haywire. The women go outside and they're just freaking out. But what I don't understand is they start laughing. Jessica and Gabby start laughing. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe they're not going to be so bad. Except then it's revealed that Gabby's plan is to just roast him in her review. While they're outside, a tree with acorns, like the acorns just fall on them. This again, they're like, what a terrible experience. And when Alexis tries to point out the fact that he has no control over the acorns, they're like, yeah, well, he should have made sure there were no acorns on that tree in general. For me, the problem was it was a contrivance. It felt like there was no reason these acorns should have been falling except to make matters worse. Anyways, let's move on. She gets super upset and she makes Gabby swear that she will not post a review. And Gabby and Jessica don't understand why she's being such a control freak, like why it matters. But Gabby agrees, only for Alexis to learn later that she lied and that she was still going to post this review. And this is when she realized, these are not the kind of people I want to be around. And is that the kind of person I am? So at this point, I'm thinking, okay, we're getting a turning point for her. This is when she's going to start developing. But we continue to come back to these moments of her superficiality. Overall, it's just really hard for me to like her. Daniel lives in a place called Walk On, and there's a whole host of characters, but the two we're going to talk about are, or three sort of, is his friend Brian, his cousin Liz, and Liz's husband Jake. Jake is the local sheriff. Apparently he's physically abusive. I don't know. Apparently Liz just likes jerks. But at some point, Alexis does ask if she and Brian had ever dated. And Daniel's like, they would never date. He's too good of a guy. She would never be attracted to him. Long story short of all of that, yeah, she and Brian do get together. Jake gets fired, suffers the repercussions of his actions. That's what happens with Jake. So I was just like, that's a lot in this book. We have abusive father, abusive boyfriend, and so mentally, emotionally abusive for those two, and then a physically and probably verbally abusive Jake. Unless that's her theme with this, I thought we should have been a bit more well-rounded. Let's cover maybe different topics, or like not have any of that at all, unless some of these stories are from other books and they're just being continued, or they will be continued. I just thought it was a little too repetitive. Naturally, she is incapable of a lot of things, and Daniel makes her more well-rounded, whereas she is like, let's get your carpentry business off the ground. So she helps him build his business so he can be more successful. I forget exactly the reason, but it's basically out of fear, because she knows he'll never be accepted in her world, because she knows she's never going to be able to leave the hospital. She just can't be with him. It's all too complicated. And he's like, slow your roll. I'm not willing to accept that. While they don't officially become boyfriend-girlfriend, they do agree that this is exclusive, that they're not going to be seeing other people. With all of that, Alexis is still cognizant of the fact that when she gets the chief position, she's going to have to break up with him anyways. That's just what's going to happen. Meanwhile, Neil, he's been doing what he needs to do with therapy, and he's actually healing. Again, his stuff all goes back to his father. He'd also been married previously. He has a grown son who's slightly younger than Daniel. He acknowledges that relationship failed for the same reason that his relationship with Alexis failed. He then tells her, yeah, you can have the house. I thought the book needed more time. So Alexis tries to break up with Daniel. They decide, let's not be boyfriend, girlfriend, but let's be exclusive. And then the next time they're together, he tells her he loves her, and she flips out. Thankfully, he, at least, is mature enough to be like, you're not just gonna run off. We need to talk about this. And she admits that she loves him too. Naturally, she gets the chief job. Before I finish that statement, she had offered Daniel the $50,000 that he needed, and he had turned her down. Even she said, it's not even a loan, it's a gift, but I want to help you out, so here's your way. And he's like, I don't think so. But now she has the chief job, and because they had established their love for each other, he shows up at the hospital to congratulate her, or maybe to commiserate, whatever direction the decision went. And this is the first time that anybody is meeting him. I believe Gabby and Jessica are there, and so they're like, why is the guy from the B&B here? Her parents, particularly her father, are like, who's this hillbilly? Neil is actually the only person who doesn't say anything, but if this forces Alexis to acknowledge their relationship and kind of stand up for their relationship. But what happens is, I think the dad says something about how she's still with Neil and how they are going to couples counseling and they live together. He gets super upset and he leaves. Bree follows him and sets things straight, and then she goes, maybe you should go to her house. Of course he gets there, he's a fish out of water, but they have their convo and he begs her to come back to walk on with him, and she refuses. I guess she just has this sense of duty. And while this is when I wanted Derek more in the picture. Like, I really hated that he showed up for 5 minutes, drops this bomb, and then is gone again. He gives them no time. He doesn't stay around to kind of help through things. And I felt like that's kind of when Derek felt very selfish to me, because he was the one who was supposed to carry on the legacy. I understand why he wouldn't want to carry on the legacy, which is the same reason as Alexis, but he just left her high and dry. And I felt like their relationship was as such that he wouldn't have left her high and dry, that he would be like, okay, I know this is hard to hear, this is what's gonna happen, but like, I'm gonna hang around to kind of get things settled. And then with his wife, it kind of added to the superficiality of this novel. Like, so he, this super down-to-earth guy who would rather live in a hut and work with underprivileged kids, is going to marry this uber wealthy, successful celebrity. We do get a little something about how she's not as superficial as you'd think, and she really cares. Her status will go a long way towards providing recognition and publicity for things. Why is all of this so unrealistic? There is also a phrase that Daniel teaches Alexis. It's not that he teaches it to her, he just brings it up and she grabs onto it like a dog with a bone, which is that grace costs you nothing. I like the sentiment, but it just felt like I am so perfect and untouchable, and so grace costs you nothing. But what about her? Like, what are we working on internally that she can throw stones? It's a month later. They have not had any contact. He is thinking, maybe it's time for me to move on. She is preparing for, let's see if I can say this, the quincentennial, so the 125-year anniversary of the hospital. She's not too happy about having to do this because the expectation was that Derek was going to do it, and obviously he's not. So she's been working with her mother and preparing for the big speech that she has to give. While she's doing that, Derek, because he has nothing left to lose, throws himself into his carpentry business. And she had tricked Gabby into buying something of his at a far higher price, which goes to show how money is no object. He kind of takes that and runs with it. And he's like, I have nothing left to lose. Why do I care what I charge for my pieces? So he charges exorbitant funds, makes the money, buys the house. I think it's the day before the quasi-quincentennial. Alexis gets a visit from Bree. They have a chat about what Alexis's priorities are. And she's just like, well, I guess I need to change my priorities. Let me change some things with the hospital. I have some ideas. Let me call an emergency board meeting and get this sorted out. She then calls Daniel, which I don't know why she called Daniel, except I believe at this point in the novel, the reader would want them interact again. Yeah, so I just don't really understand the point of this conversation, because all it does is makes him say, yeah, it's time to move on, and it makes her sad, and then he blocks her. She does try to get back in contact with Daniel, but as I said, he had blocked her. She tasks Bree with getting in touch with him because she wants him to come to this quasi-quincentennial. She's at this quasi-quincentennial. How many times do I have to say that? And she's just waiting and waiting for him to show up, and he's not showing up. Meanwhile, she re-encounters Gabby and Jessica. She kind of has a face-to-face with her parents, and then it's time for her speech. During her speech, she reveals that the hospital has agreed to satellite locations. So these are going to be locations that have no access to medicine, and so now she's going to take this hospital into the future and expanding. The first place they're going to have a satellite location is Cambodia, obviously headed by her brother and his wife, and then the other one is going to be in Walk-On, which just goes back to her privilege. She's just like, oh yeah, the day before this big event, at this late hour, they will absolutely obey my summons, and they will absolutely do what I want to do. That's what happens there. Daniel shows up at the tail end of her speech. They dance. They are like, we're so on. And now we are 1 year later. She is heading up this satellite location and Walk-On. Obviously, he never moved. They got to move into the Grant house, which no longer has to be a B&B, which there was a moment where her father had confronted her about her relationship with Daniel, and he was like, oh, well, has he asked for money yet? Which is where that $50,000 thing comes from, because she's like, he never asked, but I offered. Which I'm like, can I have 50 grand? As I said, 1 year later, Alexis is pregnant. They have the center set up and it's doing well. His friend Brian is with Liz. And then his other friend, who was a soldier and suffers from PTSD, is helping because he had been a medic in the military. And so I think he's an ambulance driver, maybe something like that. And it gives him his purpose. It also, this clinic also allows him to have the medication that he needs to stay okay. And that's the book. That is that. Thanks for bearing with me. I would love to know what you think of this book or what you think of most of her writing. A lot of people like her. I just don't think she's my cup of tea. I don't think she really digs in the way that I prefer to have a story dug into. If you want something that I think is comparable in terms of tone and subject matter, I've really enjoyed Carly Fortune's Meet Me at the Lake, and there was another one, so I'll just link them up above. Check those out and see how you think they compare. You can disagree with me if you like, that's totally fine. Bye!